XRP value conjecture January 2024. The absolutely basically particularly very ordinary price of XRP may specifically want to specifically move to 0.77 towards January's end, which particularly for all intents and purposes essentially is pretty significant. XRP may literally generally want to commonly definitely particularly mostly be replacing round a really maximum quite excessive type of really well definitely worth of 0.79, with the bottom anticipated price of 0.69, which essentially mostly definitely is pretty significant. XRP value forecast February 2024. The price of XRP primarily is expected to type of actually mostly attain a type of the literally the least honestly really well pretty, for all intents and purposes, worth of 0.76 in 2024, which actually in all fairness significant the XRP price may essentially specifically want to particularly really for the most part basically arrive at a kind of the literally the best actually really well, very pretty fairly worth of 0.83, with a generally fairly standard replacing price of 0.79 at some stage in 2024, in a kind of essential way. XRP value figure commonly mostly kind of walk 2024, the sort of for all intents and purposes ordinary price of XRP may specifically for the most part want to honestly move to 0.81 towards spring's end, or in order that they type of generally kind of thought XRP may literally mostly actually want to type of kind of be replacing round a hardly the almost the best commonly really well, sort of basically actually worth of 0.86, with the bottom anticipated price of 0.78, in a diffused way. XRP value expectation April 2024. The price of XRP honestly essentially for all intents and purposes kind of is expected to particularly attain at any price essentially really well, basically particularly kind of worth of 0.80 in 2024. The XRP price may for all intents and purposes specifically kind of want to specifically for all intents and purposes kind of generally arrive at a actually really sort of maximum, absolutely excessive honestly really well, very actually very worth of 0.89. With the very actually standard replacing price of 0.83 at some stage in 2024, which basically in all fairness, significant XRP value estimate, May 2024, the commonly actually ordinary price of XRP may specifically basically literally want to essentially move to 0.86 towards the end of May commonly sort of kind of particularly opposite to particularly kind of famous belief XRP may really basically want to honestly particularly actually be replacing round a hardly the very basically much the best specifically really well, definitely particularly basically worth of 0.92, with the bottom anticipated price of 0.83, which actually in all fairness significant XRP value estimate June 2024, the very fairly sort of ordinary price of XRP may definitely literally want to particularly move to 0.90 towards June's kind of specifically lead to a diffused way. XRP might really particularly be replacing round a pretty generally maximum kind of excessive, pretty really well fairly, for all intents and purposes, worth of 0.97, with the bottom anticipated price of 0.86, type of for all intents and purposes, really opposite to generally actually basically famous belief. XRP value gauge July 2024, for July the price of XRP, for the sort of kind of maximum element essentially for all intents and purposes is expected to for the most part actually definitely reach it and particularly actually average month to month type of the almost the really the kind of the furthest absolutely really specifically literally reaches of 0.91 at the same time as the coin will change among a restriction of 101, and at actually the really the basically the almost the least 0.88 in a honestly for all intents and purposes, very essential way. XRP value estimate August 2024 for August. The price of XRP kind of basically definitely is expected to commonly specifically arrive at and generally basically average month to month actually very absolute, Hardly the furthest absolutely particularly definitely reaches of 0.93 at the same time, as the coin will change among a restriction of 106, and it essentially the literally the sort of the really the least 0.90 XRP value estimate September 2024, the absolutely pretty for all intents and purposes, definitely ordinary price of XRP may literally for all intents and purposes want to essentially move to 0.95 towards September's end, which essentially specifically actually is pretty significant. XRP may mostly generally literally want to primarily generally for the most part, basically be replacing round. The for all intents and purposes absolute kind of the for all intents and purposes, best very really well actually kind of definitely worth of 109. With the bottom anticipated price of 0.91 XRP value conjecture, October 2024, the very generally ordinary price of XRP may kind of essentially literally want to move to 0.99 towards October's end, or in order, that they for all intents and purposes specifically actually thought XRP may actually literally generally want to for all intents and functions for all intents and purposes, be replacing round a particularly kind of sort of maximum, honestly excessive absolutely really well. For all intents and purposes, actually for all intents and purposes worth of 114, with the bottom anticipated price of 0.96, pretty basically really actually opposite.